now.
Hey everybody, good morning. Welcome. I am Brent.
I'm Bo.
And this is Rough and Tumble Joy, the Wednesday, the 8th version. We're really glad that you're here this morning. We're continuing to talk in the book of Philippians about some encouraging words that Paul has to Christians in every age, and especially in this age, about how to work through tough times and still have, a great spirit and God's strength and joy with you at all times. And we're in the middle of Philippians chapter 2. And today we're picking up with verse 14. This was one of, my parents' favorite verses when I was a kid.
Oh, really?
It's the great everything, if you want to love Jesus, you got to follow Philippians chapter 2:14 if you're a child. It's a good thing to have as a parent. So let's start there. Read that for us this morning, Bo.
All right. I'll read in the ESV just because I already had it pulled up. So it says, do this. Do all things without grumbling or disputing, that you may be blameless and innocent, children of God, without blemish in the midst of a crooked and twisted generation, among whom you shine as lights in the world, holding fast to the word of life, so that in the day of Christ I may be proud that I did not run in vain or labor in vain. Verse 17, even if I am to be poured out as a drink offering upon the sacrificial offering of your faith, I am glad and rejoice with you all. Likewise, you also should be glad and rejoice with me.
Awesome. So there's a lot of gladness in there, a lot of joy in the midst of this, and some really concrete steps we can take to pursue this Christ-like spirit and the path to joy. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's I like the NLT. They have a few little words here. I'll just point out one thing. It says in verse 14, do everything without complaining and arguing, so that no one can criticize you. Live clean, innocent lives as children of God. So I really like kind of the way their take on it of clean, innocent lives. It's this, he's continuing the ethical standards for citizens of heaven and citizens of Christ's kingdom, not Caesar's kingdom. And so he's finishing up his kind of idea of what this group looks like. And I've got a few little ideas here that I think's going through Paul's head. But before I share those, I just wanted to see what your observations are. What do you notice about this text?
Well, the first temptation toward grumbling and arguing, just this beginning point, it is really important. Mm-hmm. It is such a normal thing. It is such a common thing for us to be grumblers and complainers, to be contentious over things that don't matter that much. And everywhere you are in life, it's true. When I was a kid growing up in high school, my first job was working with the school district in the summers, cleaning up the schools, working with the janitorial staff. And I remember that first summer, how much everybody griped and complained about whatever work they were doing. I mean, there was an art form to it.
Sure, yeah.
But then I took on my first job in a church, and the first church I served in, I also discovered there were a lot of people that were like on ministerial staff and preacher types that seemed to gripe and complain. And there was a culture in some pockets of that staff that was really gripey and grumbly about, a work they ought to be doing that's really important. And, even this week, there were some people that I was talking to that were doing some good work in our community. But man, they had a long list of grumbles and complaints about the work that they were doing. And I just thought, man, it's such a temptation to fall into the trap of being grumbling and complaining about whatever work it is that God has given us to do. And one of the ways we can be distinctively Christian is to be the kind of person that commits to say, I'm just not going to be a grumbler. I'm not going to be a complainer, and I'm going to seek to not be contentious. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it builds off this idea that, okay, Paul constantly references, it's the most referenced story in the entire Bible, is the children of Israel going through the wilderness.
Oh, yeah, right.
It shows up everywhere. And unless you kind of studied Numbers 13, you wouldn't notice it. But Paul references it so many times. And this specific thing is exactly what the children of God were doing that sentenced them, continued sin, that sentenced them to that wilderness. And I don't know. Do you think maybe because they're not Jewish that he doesn't kind of fully go out with the story like he's done in other books? Or, I mean, it's word for word. Do all these things without grumbling or disputing. They grumbled and disputed against Moses and his leadership and the manna. And then, there's all these, strong people in our land, and the spies come back with doubt. And then Korah rebels, and this children of God, literally in Deuteronomy 32:5, it said, you are no longer my children, and you are a twisted and crooked generation. And then Paul
Oh
said,
yeah, right.
hey, don't be like that. And here, children, you need to be without blemish.
I think that's exactly right. And I think that he's taking these Old Testament principles that are
Mm-hmm.
ancient and established in the Old Testament, and he's saying the same kind of thing, but it is to a more Roman, a more Greco-Roman audience. So going into all that's just a lot of extra trouble, but there's no doubt that it informs this thing that's that he's having to say. For sure, that's right.
Yeah, and it's just so powerful because we forget that that is Paul says in Corinthians, all that happened to them so that you would not do the same, so that you would be believers and Christians who don't, like you said, slip into grumbling and slip into complaining and slip into coveting and slip into doubt, because that will ruin your relationship. And so, yeah, he encourages them by saying, that you may be blameless and innocent, children of God, without blemish in the midst of a crooked and twisted generation, among whom you shine as lights in the world.
Yeah, now that part of the verse is interesting to me in the ESV, because I think that there is actually kind of a depth of meaning in the original words there, which are that you're going to shine like stars in the sky, right? So this
Mm-hmm.
shift that the ESV makes, we talked about the NLT things we didn't love the other day. I kind of was reading through the ESV and I thought, well, I don't love that choice.
Sure.
I understand they're trying to make it more understandable, but I think that there is some power in the idea of being like stars in the sky as you hold firmly to the word of life. I don't know if you happen to catch the big, like super moon last night. Did you get a chance to step outside and see that, Bo?
No, with my 4 and 6 year old, we did not get a chance to get outside and take a look at the moon. I didn't. There
Well,
was
it
a
is a
big. There was a big
shame.
moon. Was it nice?
Dude, it was amazing. I read that it was 30% brighter than normal last night or something like that. It was a big number. And we had enough clear sky that you could really get a good look at it. It was amazing. Somebody I was talking to yesterday said it looked like somebody turned a flashlight on and was shining it right in our eyes.
Really?
It was really amazing. And of course, I've got this passage in my mind, and in this context, it's the star. But same idea. I think the idea of the darkness and the black of the sky is that you've got this void. There's this nothingness, right?
Yes. Yes.
In the midst of the nothing, there is the something. And that was what it felt like last night. The sky is black, and then the moon just so bright in the middle of it. And this is the picture of what we're supposed to be as believers. This is why our ethics should be high, is because we're supposed to be this light in the midst of the darkness.
Yeah, see, and that's what's so interesting about stars. And this is just a little nerd thing that I learned when I was talking with Zane. We were looking at constellations outside, and we were walking through the North Star and Orion and Cassiopeia, and we were going through these different constellations. And I was reading this little book that we had on stars. It said, "Where are the stars?" And the answer is not in the night sky. The stars are always there. Right, but it's only when the darkness comes that their brilliance shown is seen. And so the stars are always there, the constellations are always there in the middle of the day. It's when the crooked and the dark generation appears that these lights still shine. And so I don't know, I just took that as a little way to trick him and say, when do the stars come out? And he said at night. And I said, well, they're always out, but you can't see them. So it's just an interesting little parallel. Yeah. I'm putting out little kid fires, if you can't tell right now. So.
Well, yeah, for sure. Anyway, I like this idea, this beautiful idea that we as Christians let us shine like stars as we hold firmly to the word of life, right? And this idea of the word of life is scripture, but also probably this idea of logos. Paul would have been familiar with John and his use of this idea that word is not only scripture, but it's also Jesus himself, this truth, the truth that has come through the ages. From the beginning was always there, and we hold on to that truth in a generation that wants to dismiss truth and act like there is no truth, and all the postmodern junk relativity of our age sort of underlines this point.
Yeah, I think so. There's a lot of power in that word logos. It might be, if even worthy to go take a look at that word one of these times and kind of explore even how that word was developed. And like you said, the power of that specific idea would have meant a lot. And so for Paul to use that word, it's pretty important, and it's pretty specific to that day and to that time.
Yeah, and And we were just talking about the Greco-Roman thing before, and that he kind of maybe skims over something we might have seen him go deeper in if it was he was speaking to a Hebrew audience.
Right.
Here, he includes this concept that is a Greco-Roman idea. This word idea, this logos idea, is so huge in Greco-Roman philosophy in this age. This would have been something that, if a Hebrew reader had been reading this passage, they might have blown right past it and not thought much of it.
Sure.
But if you've got the Greco-Roman background, again, to your point, when you see word of life, you're like, whoa, that's huge. This idea that Jesus is the truth, this huge, big idea in history, right?
Well, what if we explored that tomorrow?
Yeah.
We don't have to do I don't know. It's a lot of fun for people who've never explored that or looked at that. It's going to be eye-opening to you. And we can kind of pick up from there tomorrow.
Yeah, and those of you that are listening, this idea is so important. It's worth the pause because it is so relevant in 2020. It's huge. So we'll pick that up tomorrow, talking about Logos, talking about the Word of Life from Philippians 2 tomorrow on the night. We'll look forward to seeing y'all then. Have a great day, everybody.
See y'all.